Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call to order the November meeting of the School Board of Directors. I'm welcoming 2 new members to our group this evening. Because we're meeting remotely, we'll need to begin with a roll call attendance. Keith Hines.
Here.
Ashley Randall.
Here.
Joanne Powers.
Here.
Casey Wharf.
Here.
And Lexi Youngblood.
Here.
And could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, so our first order of business this evening is to nominate an elected board chair. Are there any nominations for board chair this evening?
I would like to nominate Mr. Keith Hines.
I can second.
Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, if there's any discussion? All right, I'll call for a vote on the motion of Keith Hines as board chair. Again, this needs to be a roll call vote. Ashley Randall.
Yes.
Joanne Powers.
Yes.
Casey Wharf.
Yes.
Lexi Youngblood.
Yes.
Keith Hines.
I abstain.
Okay. The motion is approved. Mr. Hines, you are our new board chair. The meeting is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if it's an honor or no one else wants the job, but I'll take it nonetheless. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, the nomination and election of a vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? I will go ahead and nominate Ashley Randall. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any additional nominations? Seeing none, I will close the nominations. Any discussion on the motion to appoint Ashley vice chair? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Lexi?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Ashley?
I will abstain.
The motion carries. Ashley is the vice chair. Brings us to item 5, comments from the chair. I certainly want to thank Casey and Lexi for stepping up and choosing to serve for a 3-year term. Look forward to having you on the board. I also, and I'm somewhat hesitant to do this because it's not political, but I do ask and encourage people to make wise decisions as we head into the Thanksgiving and certainly the upcoming Christmas holiday season. The COVID numbers, while they still are in the safe range to allow us to remain open, we're very fortunate that we're able to send our students to school 5 days a week. And frankly, some of our students who go to school outside of West Bath aren't as fortunate. And I just would really ask that the community continue to support our school, continue to make safe, responsible decisions so that we can continue to offer that opportunity for our students moving forward. With that, we will move on to item 6, approve or amend the minutes for the October 21st meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Motion's been made. Is there seconded by Joanne? Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Ashley?
Yes.
Lexi?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
That passes unanimously. We do, on to item 7, we do have one adjustment to the agenda. We are going to add an item 12.3 regarding the school calendar. Brings us to item 8, public comment. I do not know, I did not receive any public comment beforehand. We'll pause and take a quick check. Did
May
not
I,
receive any public comment.
may I interject quickly with maybe a board comment?
Sure.
So welcome Lexi and Casey. I'm wondering if we should just maybe give a quick rundown of what we've just done for our 2 new members so that they are sort of aware of the format of our meetings, and we don't elect chairs and vice chairs every meeting, and we do approve minutes and those things, so that I know this is a crazy time to be joining a board. So just maybe so that you are not completely confused as to what we're doing in the process, I guess.
Sure. So we elect
Go ahead, sorry.
meeting after the election. Sometimes that works out so it's in November. Sometimes it gets pushed into the first meeting of December. So we do that once a year, and we're chair and vice chair for a year unless you choose to remove us because we're doing a poor job. Hopefully that doesn't occur. And like Ashley said, we do review the minutes every meeting. They are sent out in advance of the meeting as board packets. What else should we touch on, Ashley?
I think beyond there, it's pretty self-explanatory to follow down the agenda. It's just, I know that first part can be a little bit overwhelming coming into it if you've never attended a meeting before, and then also the first one after an election. So I just thought it may be helpful to give a quick rundown of what happened and then what's to follow so that it's a little bit easier to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. And Casey, Lexi, please feel free to
Thank
stop us at any point in time. We're not an overly formal group. We want you to learn the process. It is a little cumbersome at first, so don't feel like you're interrupting or asking a silly question. We're fully transparent, and we will have, and it's further on in the agenda, but we will have an orientation for the board coming up in December. So you'll be able to get a lot of insight there as well. But please, don't feel like you're interrupting, ask any questions that come up. I do want to remind the public, if there are any questions over the course of the meeting, those can be emailed to publiccomment@westbathschool.org. And any public comment that's received during the meeting will be read at the second public comment section later on in the agenda. So please email those comments to publiccomment@westbathschool.org. Moving on to committee updates, item 9.1, the policy committee. We do not have any update this evening, though we will be adding a new member to the policy committee later on in the agenda. Item 9.2, technology committee.
There is also no update from this committee. And when we move into committee members looking at assignments later on, I'm going to recommend that we move this to an ad hoc basis rather than being regular committee.
Okay, we'll take that up later on. 9.3, facilities committee.
This is not an official update because the committee hasn't had the chance to meet, but next week, while students are not in the building on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we have several projects that will be taking place utilizing our COVID relief funds. So you know that we've had a series of ventilation projects that we needed to do in order to be able to meet the reopening requirements. And Siemens took care of a bunch of those, primarily in the nursing space earlier in the year. And then they're finalizing some of our secondary projects over the next several days. So those projects, they're in the special education room and Title I room. They're going to adjust the airflow, the fan speeds, and make sure the setting the flow is set to code. They're also going to start some new ductwork on the next round of our projects, which are in our office spaces, in the guidance space, and possibly in our TI spaces if time allows. Those are secondary projects because they're not instructional spaces currently for students. But now they have the time to be able to get that work done because we don't have students in school next week, so that will happen. Additionally, Premium H2O is going to be swapping out all of our classroom and bathroom faucets with touchless faucets as a way to be able to minimize more touch points for students and staff during the day. So that work will primarily get done next week. We may not get it entirely completed, but a big chunk of that work will be done. And again, those projects are all being funded by the COVID relief funds. Additionally, the gym floor is being cleaned and waxed. That was something that we didn't quite get to before we reopened, and it's not a space we've been using for students. So it wasn't the priority, but that'll happen next week. And then hopefully enough time remains for putting up. We have a series of coat racks that we purchased with our COVID relief funds for all of the students' winter gear. They'll be able to space their winter gear out, physically distance around the building. So hopefully all those will be put up next week as well. So it's a lot for a 3-day turnaround. But again, the timing of having 3 days without students in the building next week really works out well to get this work done. Just wanted to give you that update.
Great, thank you. Any questions on any of that? 9.4 Finance Committee. 9.4.1 payroll. I reviewed payroll on 10/26 and then actually Ashley and I both reviewed those on 11/4 and 11/18. Brings us to item 10, Superintendent's Report. And we are getting a little bit of feedback, so I could just ask people to mute if they're not talking. That may help clear that up a little bit.
Okay. In regards to the financial report, which you have in your packet, the brief version is that with 62% of the year remaining, we still have 72% of our budget remaining, and all of our lines are tracking appropriately. But there are a couple of things to note because it is different. And on page 1 of the financial form, on the financial packet, you'll see that we have some unemployment costs, so we don't typically have. And that's both in the unemployment professional line and the unemployment subline. It's not a big amount, but it's something that we typically haven't had unemployment claims. And as you likely know, across the state and the nation, claims have been higher because of COVID shutdowns. And so for us, these claims came from prior staff and also from substitutes. And I've read in some other newspaper articles for other districts that we're not alone with seeing these costs for the first time, and so or increase in costs. So because we have a negative amount on the unemployment professional line, I just wanted to make sure that you knew what that was there. And then additionally, we still have a few items. I had moved all the CRF lines out of the regular budget, the expenses that we talked about last month. But now with the second round of COVID funding, there are a few items I needed to have a place to bill until those lines could be reimbursed. And so on the instructional equipment line on page 1, you'll see that that's overexpended. That'll be corrected. And then additionally in the school board budget lines on page 9 under other expenses and other items, those were other holding places I'd had for CRF funds. Those will be corrected. But even without those corrections, all of our lines are tracking appropriately, and the bottom lines are exactly as they should be. And then again for Casey and Lexi, this is a budget document you'll see every month and more frequently if you have questions. And it's just something to get familiar with in terms of seeing how the school budget's set up. And you're welcome to ask me questions at any time. It doesn't have to be just in relation to our, during our school board meetings. At any time you have questions, please reach out. So, Keith, that's what I have for the finances, unless you have questions.
I just have a question. Can you just explain the unemployment? I guess I'm trying to figure out, going back to that document, sorry.
So in looking at page 1.
Right. I'm wondering what the circumstances were.
The circumstances were in relation to people being out of work. There are regulations and laws around being able to access unemployment funds. And so for substitute teachers, if they are no longer able to be employed and they were expecting that, they can file unemployment claims that then actually they go through the town office, they don't go through here. And then if they're eligible for unemployment, then we are responsible for a portion of that claim. And then for professionals, it's in this circumstance, it was a staff member that we had who no longer works here, but you're eligible. I think it's your last 3 employers that may need to pay a portion into unemployment. So because of the governor's executive order last year for all school staff to be paid through June 30th. There's no unemployment for or need for unemployment for any of our staff who was current through June 30th. They were not eligible, but anyone who was not staff, like a substitute teacher or who had been part of our prior staff, potentially could have been eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions on the finances? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
All right, in terms of district updates, we continue to be at school in person 5 days per week. And it really is becoming apparent what a fortunate situation that is from the beginning to be able to have started school at 5 days. There are very few schools that were able to pull that off, and that we've been able to remain that way now, through middle of November. We feel very, very fortunate. Having a hard time believing that we're actually already through the first trimester, a third of the way through the school year. It's gone very quickly. We're at the time where student-led conferences are about to happen. As you know, they're scheduled for Monday and Tuesday with students and parents, and we scheduled them in 30 minutes blocks of remote meetings. The meetings will be set up so that the students will have the opportunity to do their student-led conferences at the beginning, and then we've allowed for some extra time to connect with families afterwards, up to about 30 minutes, because our face-to-face time is limited this year, and it was limited last spring, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to connect with families and to have extended conversation. And again, the reason we're able to do this and have that extended time is because of the change that you voted on in the calendar last time. And so I want you to know how much that's appreciated, both for the ability to be able to connect with families, but also to give the staff a moment to take a breath and focus on time to connect and time to get some other work done also. They've been really putting their heart and soul and every ounce of energy they have into making sure our year is going well. Report cards will be mailed home next Tuesday, and we'll at the beginning of trimester 2. I want to also take a minute to thank our community crew. While the West Bath community crew is not having in-person meetings, there's a small but mighty group in the background that's still working really hard to support the school in any way that they can think of. And that's ranged in terms of things like they sent us sweets from the Bath Sweet Shop for Halloween. And there have been some other just notes of appreciation that have come in from the crew. But they're also currently holding online fundraisers for holiday orders and sponsoring socially distanced holiday tree sale, and continuing with Clink. And at a time when it's easy to just say, no, we're going to stop all of these pieces and just focus on what's right directly in front of us, I'm deeply appreciative that there's still a community crew out there working hard behind the scenes to support the efforts of the school, both financially, but also emotionally. So thank you to them. And then I also, again, need to take a minute to thank our families because like Keith said at the beginning of the meeting, it's the choices that families are making outside of school, the safe choices, allow us to be able to continue to be at school in person. And I want to thank our students who continuously show us that they're flexible and resilient and positive despite the fact that they're living through a global pandemic and that everything is different for them. And then again, to our staff who without hesitation has put the needs of our students and families in the community first and work as hard as they possibly can every day. So I'm really feel very fortunate for the successes we've had this fall. So glad to be able to work with our students in person, but it's taken all of us to be able to make this happen. And it really sort of encompasses the whole concept of #WeAreCrew. So those are my district updates for tonight.
Any board questions on the updates?
I just had curious in the uneventful, hopefully uneventful situation that the governor shuts down the schools. How is that going to work? I know we had talked about that, but just kind of refresh my memory.
Sure. I can email you out our overall plan again so that
I know you did. I remember going over that, but I was just curious if
especially with new board members, it would be good for us to sort of talk about it as a group. But when we set up our back to back to school plan this summer, we actually started with the remote plan first, and we put all of our first effort into what does really strong remote learning look like. So our plan actually is already directly laid out for what it would look like for students at grade levels, every grade level, for what their direct instruction would encompass, how that would be organized, what platforms we'd be using, and how much time of the day it is. So we'd be looking at about 3 hours per day of direct instruction over Google Meets and using Google Classroom as our platform. The caveat to that is when we wrote the plan, we weren't sure that 3 hours was appropriate for kindergarten and first grade. It's a long time for students to be sitting in a screen and having direct instruction. But that's something that if we were to go back into a remote session, we would have to make some decisions about how much time is the right amount of time for young students. Also with K&1 in particular last year, we did not do a whole lot of direct instruction with them like we did for other grade levels. And so we had really looked at what were the successes from our remote learning situation last spring, what were the challenges, and got feedback from parents, feedback from staff, worked with our partners at EL, and crafted sort of a new and improved direct instruction plan for if we were remote. We, Joanne, purchased a platform for our modules that are where last year it was really hard for us to still continue our literacy instruction because so much of that is based on being in person and turning to the student next to you. But we now have a digital platform that we're able to give all of our module instruction on, and it ties back into our Google Classroom. And so already here in school, we have made sure that that's the way we're delivering our module instruction every day, so that students are able to use that platform and know how to turn their work in through Google Classroom. And so if we are to go remote, then that would continue. At 2 through 5, we also are piloting a new math program that is works in sync with the Google Classroom. And it was one that we were going to pilot last year before we went remote anyway. And so there are some other built-in systems that work with instruction for that math program that are more easier is not the right word, but more compatible with the electronic platform of being remote. And so for 2 through 5, that'll be an easier transition. And again, they're doing that in person now also. K1 has continuing with everyday math, and their plan is that they would have direct instruction over Google Meets for their literacy, and their math and specials would be asynchronous. So that's sort of a brief overview, but it's about 3 hours of instruction every day for 2 through 5, and some adjustments K1 depending on the time of year that we're in.
Thank you. And just to refresh my memory, if the governor designates Saginaw yellow, you can still continue 100%, correct?
We can, unless we decide locally that we need to do something else. But the way that we set our plan up was that we said whether we were in green or yellow, our students would be spaced 6 feet apart in the classroom. And so the purpose of being hybrid is to be able to reduce the numbers of people in the school so that you can maintain the physical distancing. But if you can maintain the physical distancing without reducing the numbers, then there's not that need to do so. So that was how we had set up our plan.
Okay. Thank you for refreshing my memory. I know it was a while ago, and now it seems kind of looming.
I will forward out that document because it has been a while since we've looked at it. I don't have it right in front of me, and I had to just pull those pieces from memory. I would have liked to have referred to it directly, but the big pieces are that it's direct instruction rather than. And last year, some of our younger students in particular had a menu of things to choose from, and we relied on the parents a lot. And so now we'll be set up to have more direct instruction with the teachers on a daily basis rather than having to rely on the parents so heavily. And then again, really with that effort this fall to build the routines and capacity of our students to be able to continue with their literacy modules or their math modules, whether you're in person or remote. It'll be a little more seamless than it was last spring.
Additional board questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to old business, item 11.1, in-person instruction updates.
So I put this on the agenda mainly to make sure that we had a place to be able to ask questions that you might have, and to check in on any, similar to Joanne's just question, any concerns that you might have or wonderments about what things might look like. I will just start by saying that things continue to go very well here at school. And part of that is that we've had some good luck and that we haven't had any COVID cases in our immediate school families. But again, that luck comes from families and staff making really good, safe choices outside of school. And so we're grateful for that help and support. I do believe that if we have a case that all of our DOE and CDC requirements that we're required to meet in order to have in-person instruction is going to keep cases from going any further. Recent reports from Dr. Shaw and the CDC say that with a few exceptions, that while there are cases that are associated with schools, the cases are coming from community actions and not from school actions, and there's not school transmission. And so that is encouraging, but it does mean that we need to continue to do all the things that we're required to do, maintaining our distance, using our face coverings, having hand hygiene, all those things that are listed, and need to do them well to make sure that if there is a case at school, that we're not contributing to transmission of that case. Last month, they reported that we have moved into a nice rhythm and families were accessing the health screening daily. They were communicating with our school nurses to talk about symptoms. They're following the requirements of the guidance of the DOE flowchart for when students need to be tested, and they were easily accessing testing. And we really did have several weeks of things moving very smoothly. Results were coming back quickly. Kids were able to come right back to school. But over the last week or so, that started to shift a bit because there has been a surge in the state and testing is harder to come by, which is problematic for being able to support the infrastructure of being back in school in person. The longer it is for kids to be out of school, waiting for test results means that there's more potential exposure while we're waiting. We're not able to do the contact tracing as well as we would want to. And it also means that kids are potentially then not getting tested, and then we don't have that information to know what is really the status of our community. So that is a concern as the state's trying to handle their surge. I did talk to Dr. Hanna yesterday about my concerns around testing turnaround, because we were hearing from parents that they were hearing at one of our local doctor's offices that the wait for data was 7 to 10 days at this point. And that's really just not feasible to be able to still continue to work through the flow chart and to be able to have kids come back and be part of in-person instruction. But in talking with Dr. Hanna, she assured me that if students are part of the Midcoast organization or a part of Maine Health, that the swab and send sites both at Midcoast Hospital and at Miles Hospital in Damascotta, they're able to get in there and have a fast turnaround. And their websites say that it's 3 to 5 days to get results, which is much more doable, but that in reality, it's more like 14 to 24 hours. And I know when I had to have my own child tested a couple of weeks ago, that was our experience. We had data in about 12 hours. And so part of what we're really trying to do now is make sure that if we do need to have staff or students tested, that our school nurses are working with families to try to find out the best option for being able to get quick test results. But it is something just to be aware of, that I do feel that this is a fragile piece of the state structure of having in-person instruction. No matter what we do here, if there's not a good testing infrastructure, it's going to be a challenge for us. And then I also just sort of want to touch base on the COVID numbers around the state, because I'm sure that you're seeing the numbers that are being reported across the state. And yesterday, Dr. Hanna said that it was 2.69% positivity rate across the state. And we had been sort of forewarned that if we were at a 3% positivity rate, that's a time where we might start thinking about needing to have more statewide shutdowns. But yesterday, also Saginaw County's positivity percentage rate was 1%. And so while we're looking at statewide numbers, we also need to really be thinking about what does that mean locally here. And that's the piece that we especially need to be paying attention to, because as we saw earlier in the fall, those numbers swing, especially in a small county like Saginaw County, that just a few days of high testing rates really can throw off your percentages. And so we're watching the numbers very carefully. The Department of Education has been fantastic about giving us regular updates on Fridays when they do their health updates on the green, yellow, and red coding. They give us all the figures that are behind their decision making. And then again, I just want to reiterate that locally, we get to make the choices that we need to for our school too. So if we reach a place where we need to talk about remote instruction before the state's ready to, that's our, we have that right to do so. But again, yesterday was at 1% positivity rate in Saginaw County. We're doing a good job, and we need to continue to do a good job. I want to just give you the chance to ask any questions that you might have around in-person instruction or remote at that.
I'm just curious, because these kids seem to be missing more days because they're waiting for their test results. Are those days they're considered absent?
So, Joanne, that is a really good question. And tomorrow is my meeting with the commissioner, and that was one of the questions I submitted. Right now, I'm recording students who are not present in the building as absent, but if they're connected to their remote learning on those days, I'm making just a note of that so that if I can change it back to being present, I will. I know that we're recording our attendance for our remote students, when they're accessing their remote education, that they're present. And so that still hasn't been figured out on the state level, but I've been collecting the data so I can make that change when there is that answer. And tomorrow morning, as I said, that's a question that I did submit.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because
Yeah.
it seems why should a child be penalized if it's out of their control?
Right.
With today being, probably if my memory serves me correctly, this first real cold day since we returned to school, any challenges that you maybe didn't anticipate for colder weather that came up today that we should be aware of? We've got a hardy group.
Nothing that wasn't anticipated, but it was cold. And there wasn't as much outdoor instruction as there has been on those 60 and 70 degree days. We have worked with LL Bean to create an order for our COVID funds to be able to purchase snow pants and hats and mittens for all of our students so that we can have a set that's kept here so that we can ensure that every child has warm clothing every day. And so after Thanksgiving, I'll communicate with families about that. We're actually also working with them on setting up something similar for rain gear so that we always have a set of rain gear here. That also will eliminate families having to send things in every day. Their stuff will stay here and we'll know that they always have something warm to be able to put on. We are a hardy group, and beyond being able to dress for the weather, that's really sort of the extent of how we're going to be able to manage being outside. But if you go back to thinking about our Winter Kids experiences over the last 2 years, we've spent the last 2 Januaries outside every day in frigid conditions. And so if it's possible for us to be outside, then that's where we'll be when it makes sense to be. But we also know that we've set up our ventilation to be able to make sure that we're ventilating all of our classrooms appropriately. And we have high level filtration in all of our classrooms. So we're doing all those other things inside of the building also.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments, concerns? All right, we'll move on to item 11.2, the school board meeting calendar and school board orientation.
So I put these on the agenda mainly because now with 2 new board members, I wanted to be sure that our meeting times worked for our new board members. So if you click on the, in your board packet, you'll be able to see the calendar meeting dates, or they're hyperlinked from your agenda. Those are the dates that had been set. And we had, I think, said we would be meeting at 6 o'clock if we were in person. But remote meetings really are where we need to be right now. Not because I don't want to see you all here in person, but even part of the back to school in-person rules for staff is that we meet remotely even when we're here in the building together. And so it's just another good practice to sort of keep us from congregating. We've been meeting at 4:30 when we are remote. That doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. And I wanted to be sure that we had the opportunity to now, as a new board, take a look at meeting dates and figure out what works best for you. And then along with that, I've spoken with Steve Bailey from MSMA about our school board orientation, and he gave us some dates to be able to pick from to be able to set up that orientation. Keith and I were looking at dates initially and thinking that if we were able to use December 10th as the orientation day and then move our regular meeting to be right after that orientation, then that would take care of our December meeting. And then really looking at moving forward for what you'd like the schedule to look like from January on would be the big question.
So let's kind of take that in a couple different pieces. Does 4:30 for remote meetings still work for everybody, or do we want to look at pushing it a little bit? Part of the reason we went with 4:30 is because it allowed Emily to get home at a decent hour. All right, it looks like 4:30 continues to work. So how about the December meeting? Does it make sense to move the meeting to the 10th and piggyback that with a board orientation? MSMA stands for Maine School Management Association. It's a statewide advisory group that helps us out a lot. And Steve Bailey, who's the executive director, happens to also be a West Bath resident. So a double win for us.
Is the 10th also a Wednesday? I don't have my calendar.
It is not. It's a Thursday. I would have preferred the 9th, but he's not available. So I was trying to get it as close to our regular meeting as I could.
All right, so it's a Thursday instead of a Wednesday.
Right.
Okay.
And so we'd have the orientation for about an hour, and then we would have our December meeting after that.
And those would both be virtual.
Right.
And at
All right,
4:30.
Yes.
That plan works for me.
Seems like we have consensus for the 10th for both events. The rest of the dates were in the board packet. Were there any dates there that didn't work for people? And keep in mind, things do come up. We may need to shift those a little bit. Certainly would reach out to the board if that was the case. Generally speaking, does it look workable? All right. Then I will go ahead and make a motion that we move the December meeting to December 10th following board orientation, and that we adopt the remainder of the calendar as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion?
We all have to wear green on the St. Patrick's Day meeting.
I will go ahead and call the roll. Everyone's picture's changed on my screen, so it's going to be a different order. We'll start Casey,
Yes.
Ashley,
Yes.
Lexi,
Yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That passes unanimously. On to new business, item 12.1, board standing committee assignments. There was a list in your board packets of our standing committees. We have the facilities committee, which currently has Ashley serving on it and one vacancy. We have the finance committee, which is made up of myself and Ashley currently. The policy committee is myself and a vacancy. And then the negotiations committee is myself and Joanne. As Emily mentioned earlier on, we would suggest moving the technology committee to an ad hoc committee, and that currently has Joanne and a vacancy. We also have the wellness council as an ad hoc committee, which is Ashley and Joanne. And then we have the comprehensive planning committee, which is myself and Ashley. Probably the best place to start, Joanne, Ashley, are you on any committees that you'd like to free up and change, or are you good with your current assignments and then fill in accordingly?
I am willing to free up a space on the wellness ad hoc. I would also volunteer for those.
I Had some hiccups there in the audio, but it sounded like you said you'd be interested in giving up your spot on the Wellness Committee and would have interest in joining the Policy Committee.
Yes.
Okay. How about you, Joanne? Are you good with the ones you're on now? Would you like to change any?
Well, I think there was trouble because the wellness committee, correct me if I'm wrong, only met during the day. So that was really hard for me. I felt, bad that I couldn't be there for that. So if someone else is able to meet during the day, but the negotiations I will remain on. I'm assuming we're going to be busy with that pretty soon.
We are.
So the Wellness Council, if that group meets this year, it will not be during the day because I can't pull staff, just by nature of our structure with the pandemic. But I do agree that was hard, Joanne, that I kept asking you and you weren't able to leave school. So
I wasn't feeling like I was a true member. But if you're meeting remotely, like after school, that would work.
Sounds like that's the case, so we'll plan on keeping you on that committee, Joanne? Okay.
I would also just add in, Keith, that Lexi is also a member of that council as a parent. So maybe that's a good place for her to jump in.
Yes, I'd love to join that committee.
Perfect. We'll pencil you in there. So we have vacancies on the Facilities Committee and the Technology Committee. Casey?
Sorry, you were frozen.
I did freeze. It's my fault.
Yeah. Can you repeat that again?
So we have vacancies on the Facilities Committee and the Technology Committee. Either of those interest you? Like maybe facilities?
Facilities would be good. Technology is not my strong point.
I think that sounds good to me. And I think we can leave the technology with just the one member for the moment if we need to.
Okay, so what I have, and please correct me if I didn't catch everything correctly. On facilities, I have Ashley and Casey. On finance, I have myself and Ashley. On policy, I have myself and Ashley. Negotiations, myself and Joanne. The Wellness Council, we have Lexi and Joanne. The Comprehensive Planning Committee, myself and Ashley, and then Technology Committee, Joanne. All captured correctly? Then I will, do we need a vote on this? We do. I will go ahead and make a motion. We approve the committee assignments as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Casey?
Yes.
Ashley? Lexi?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
That passes unanimous. Brings us to item 12.2, board goals. Really, this is it's an annual project we do that kind of drives the direction of the board for the coming year. We also incorporate it into our budget process when that starts, which is going to start again very soon. So in your packet, we gave the current board goals. One of our goals is to provide unwavering support to ensure West Bath School succeeds as a fully accredited EL school. The second goal was to establish an effective communication plan to develop collaborative relationships with our community and residents. Sub-goals under that were consistently advocate for the needs of the WBSA youth and the development of positive partnerships. Maintain an effective media relations plan to help improve knowledge about and support for the district, and communicate what it means to be an EL school at all levels. And then our third goal, develop policy and explore and encourage programming opportunities or expansion with the needs and well-being of our school community in mind, with sub-goals to promote student and faculty wellness through policy development and curricular opportunities, develop emergency management and preparedness plans and policies. We certainly put that to the test this year, and explore appropriate cost-saving partnerships with other districts. So, in preparation for our December meeting, I would just encourage the board members to kind of think about what you'd like to see for our goals moving forward for the coming year. Certainly happy to answer any questions on, the logic behind our current goals, if folks have them, or just engage in a general discussion now. But what I'd like to see happen is our next meeting, we can kick around new goals and adopt new goals. Everyone good with that process? And or does anybody have any questions or comments on our current? Go ahead, Lex.
I have a question. Where do I find the goals? I missed that.
They would have been in the board packet that Emily sent out, and I believe they're also on our website, are they not?
The easiest place is the board packet, and I can make sure.
I was just looking through there. It must not be labeled the goals. It must be with other information as well.
If you click on the agenda within the board packet, everything's hyperlinked. So then you're able to get to everything easily from the agenda in the board packet. And the other thing I'll just say about board goals is I think we adopted these at the end of January, and then our world sort of shifted very quickly 6 weeks later. So there may be some goals that we need to adjust or address in a different way, and maybe their goals look entirely different given the state of where things are right now. So just to put that out there, that it's okay if things look entirely different than what you see on this document here.
On the board goals.
On the board goals, yeah. If the conversation next month looks entirely different, that is okay. Lexi, were you able to find them?
Not yet, but I'm still looking.
Okay.
I'll find them.
I'll help.
All right, we'll move on to item 12.3, the school calendar. We're pausing briefly here.
I'm sorry, I was just sending it to Lexi.
Yeah, no, I know. Yep.
All right. I wanted to just touch base on our school calendar because last month we made the adjustment to our Thanksgiving week. We had 2 half days on the 23rd and the 24th that we made into 2 professional days to be able to do our student-led conferences in a different format. Looking at our month of December, I wanted to touch base with you and sort of get your feedback on what you think in terms of this month. And typically we wouldn't be adjusting our calendar like this, but these are not typical times. So if you sort of look back at the trend of COVID percentages, around Halloween, we had a surge that came from Columbus Day gatherings. And then, right now we're really experiencing the surge that's coming from Halloween gatherings. And then we're heading into Thanksgiving. And so we can assume that we'll probably continue to see higher numbers moving into the next month. In looking at our December calendar, we had scheduled to have a full day of instruction on the 21st and a half day of instruction on the 22nd, and then we'd be leaving for winter break. I would love to discuss your thoughts on having those days also be 2 professional days rather than student days, so that our last student day would be December 18th, and then we'd move into a 2-week break for students. I think that our students would appreciate that. my hesitancy is that I haven't discussed it with families to know how that feels on the family side of things. I know that the staff would appreciate having the time to be able to be thinking about the transition in January and starting new modules and getting a little bit of professional time where we don't have that built into our schedule like we have in the past. I also feel with holidays coming up, there is some risk to the numbers locally. And if we can sort of say that if we can get to the 18th and then we have a 2-week break, that just feels better to me. Whether that's scientifically accurate or not, I don't know. But I have this sort of sense of the community that's sort of what we need at this time. My hesitancy is that if children are not here in the building, I don't know where they are, and I don't know who they're mixing with, and it mixes up some of the pods that we work so hard to keep cohorted here. And I don't want to negatively impact families. And so that is my hesitancy, and not just saying, let's take those as just professional days. But I do believe in the grand scheme of things, it would be better for our community if we said the 18th is the last student day and then had the 2 weeks for students to have off. But I would love your feedback on that.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm in full support of it for all the reasons that, especially I appreciate that the teachers did so much to sort of stack those development days to the beginning so they kind of get a handle on what the year was going to look like. But I think that they could certainly use some more time. They deserve more for all the work that they've put in the last couple of months, just to have a breather, be able to regroup. And I also think that it might be easier for families. And for the first thing is they have plenty of notice, but I feel like it's not easier to prepare for one whole week off than it is for a 3.5 day school week. And also with your concern with the intermingling, at least it's in the beginning of that period, so you still do have the rest of the time. So I agree.
Other board thought?
I can speak from a teacher's perspective that I certainly think that would be welcome. I know we have Wednesdays as professional days, and I left the school today thinking I wish I had 12 more Wednesdays, because I feel like I'm never having enough of that time. So I can imagine that's how they feel, is just that extra time because everything's different this year.
I think with the science, it makes sense, but like you, Emily, my concern is, families who don't have another option. I don't know if there is anything that could be provided to some of those families, and I don't even know how many families that is, but I mean, it seems like they are a concern, putting, more stress on the family. But it does seem like a wise idea as far as containing the virus and limiting its spread.
Any other board feedback or comments? I guess I agree 100% with what Lexi just said. Completely support the science behind the idea. I completely support giving our staff the opportunity to take a deep breath. Frankly, as a parent, it does kind of feel like we're just holding on to get to Thanksgiving, and I'm sure after Thanksgiving, it's going to feel like we're going to just hold on and hope we can keep doing 5 days until we get to Christmas, and we'll see what happens in 2021. Maybe the world resets and some normalcy returns. I don't know. I think generally I would be in support of the idea.
I think the other thing I just would want to add is that typically whenever we make changes to our calendar, we would have to adjust it on another end to make those days back up. But there still is that waiver in place that allows for flexibility through the end of this year.
Do I have a motion one way or the other?
a motion to make the day and Tuesday of winter break week professional development.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to make the 21st and the 22nd professional development days non-student days. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Casey?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Lexi?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That passes unanimous. Brings us to item 13, public comment. We'll pause briefly to see if any comments were emailed in.
No public comments.
Public comments. Our next scheduled meeting, based on the change we made today, will be December 10th. At 4:30, we will start with a workshop with MSMA, and then our regular board meeting will begin immediately following the end of that workshop. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we enter into executive session pursuant to Title I, Chapter 13, Section 4056A of the MRSA for the purpose of discussing a personnel issue.
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and second. I will go ahead and call the roll. Casey?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Lexi?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. We are going to go into executive session. For the board members, we need to leave this meeting, and then you have a second meeting invite that you join in, but make sure you close this one before you go into the next one, and we'll see everyone in the executive session meeting room. We'll give Lexi just a second to jump from meeting invite to meeting invite. We are back in regular session. You're muted.
We have no further business. Do we want to just move forward?
Sure. At this point, it brings us to item 17, and I would gladly entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. I will call the roll. Ashley?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Great first meeting. We'll see everyone in December for orientation in our December meeting. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Be safe.